My marriage did not end when my wife kissed another man. It ended several hours later, when Natalie sat across from me at dinner and smiled as though her afternoon had been completely ordinary. She asked whether I wanted more wine. She laughed at something on television. She touched my hand with the same easy familiarity she had used for 6 years, and I felt nothing unusual because I still believed I knew the woman touching me. That changed when I went into the garage. My name is Elijah Hale. I was 38 and worked as an operations director for a regional construction supplier in Greenville, South Carolina. I grew up in a home where money was respected because it never came easily. My father drove the same truck for 11 years. My mother clipped coupons every Sunday. They taught me that discipline was not coldness. It was how ordinary people protected what they loved. By 32, I had bought the house on Whitfield Lane with savings accumulated over a decade. I also owned shares in the family supply business my father had helped build. Neither made me rich, but both represented years of early mornings, delayed pleasures, and careful decisions. I met Natalie that same year. She was 30, restless, charming, and working part-time for an event planning company. We married 2 years later. By our second anniversary, she had stopped working. First came interior design classes, then an online boutique, then wellness retreats and expensive equipment. I funded every new beginning. None lasted. I never resented supporting my wife. What I noticed too late was that gratitude had slowly become expectation. Before the wedding, my father insisted on a prenuptial agreement. It protected my premarital home, business shares, and separate investments. It also contained clauses covering infidelity and deliberate misuse of marital funds. Natalie signed it lightly. "I'm marrying Elijah, not his balance sheet," she told my father with a laugh. My father nodded, but he replied seriously, "Then the agreement should never matter." The scratch appeared on a Thursday. Natalie came home around 6:30 and mentioned a white graze along the rear passenger panel of her car. She guessed someone had clipped it in a supermarket parking lot. After dinner, I inspected it and remembered the dashcam's parking surveillance feature. I removed the memory card and opened the latest files on my laptop. The camera had not captured the moment the scratch occurred, but it had recorded where she had driven that afternoon. There was no supermarket. The footage showed Natalie traveling nearly 50 minutes outside Greenville, turning onto a wooded road and stopping beside a timber cabin. A tall man stepped off the porch and approached her with the confidence of someone who had done it before. Natalie got out and met him halfway. Then she put both hands around his neck and kissed him. I watched once in disbelief, once in fury, and a third time in complete silence. During the first viewing, my mind invented explanations faster than I could reject them. By the second, those excuses collapsed. Heat climbed through my chest. On the third, the heat disappeared and something inside me became cold. The worst part was how natural she looked. I copied the footage onto 2 encrypted drives and returned the memory card before she noticed. That night, Natalie sat beside me and showed me paint samples for our bedroom. "Do you prefer the lighter green or the darker one?" she asked. "Either would look good," I answered. Before bed, she kissed my cheek. "I spent the afternoon shopping with Caroline," she said casually. I looked into her eyes and replied, "I hope you found what you wanted." Caroline had never been in the car. For the first time in our marriage, the truth belonged only to me. Between midnight and 3, I imagined turning on the lamp, placing the laptop between us, and forcing her to watch the footage. I wanted the shock on her face. I wanted one clean moment in which she could not lie. But confrontation would give her information. She would deny first, minimize second, cry third, and spend the rest of the night deleting whatever I had not found. She would warn the man, erase messages, and reshape her story around the limits of my knowledge. By morning, she might be presenting my anger as the real betrayal. So I stayed still. Knowledge was the only advantage I had, and I refused to trade it for emotional relief. On Friday morning, I kissed her goodbye and left at my usual time. From the office parking lot, I sent a message asking whether she needed anything from the store. "Just you home safe, handsome," she replied. I stared at those words until they stopped looking affectionate. At my desk with the door locked, I reviewed the footage. 3 digits of the cabin number were visible. I searched rental listings until I matched the timber frame, gravel drive, and tree line. The black SUV behind Natalie's car had a partially visible registration plate. I recorded every detail. That afternoon, I called Daniel Bell, the attorney who had prepared our prenup. I described the situation carefully and asked whether dashcam footage could be used in family court, whether I could legally track a vehicle registered in my name, and what would prove misuse of marital funds. Document facts, Daniel advised. Do not threaten anyone, enter private property, or publish anything. Most importantly, do not let anger turn a strong case into a weak one. Before ending the call, he added, "When you are ready to stop speaking hypothetically, come and see me." That evening, after Natalie went upstairs, I placed a GPS tracker beneath the car I had purchased and registered in my name. For the next 12 days, the tracker showed nothing suspicious. Those days changed me more than the footage had. I learned how suspicion infects ordinary life. Whenever Natalie carried her phone into another room, I noticed. Every shower seemed too long. Every affectionate gesture felt rehearsed. I hated becoming a man who measured pauses, checked timestamps, and heard deception inside harmless sentences. More than once, I nearly removed the tracker and confronted her just to end the waiting. Each time, I opened the copied footage and watched the first few seconds. That was enough to remind me that patience was not weakness. It was protection. On the Wednesday evening before the tracker finally moved, she cooked my favorite meal and suggested a weekend in Charleston. "I thought we could take Friday off and get away," she said. "I'll check my schedule," I replied. For one dangerous hour, I almost convinced myself that the cabin had been a single act she regretted. The following afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after I found the scratch, I was leading a meeting when my phone vibrated. The tracked car had left home. I watched the route update beneath the conference table. Natalie took the same highway, the same southern junction, and the same wooded road. "I'm not feeling well, so we'll finish this tomorrow," I told my department heads. I parked several hundred yards from the cabin and entered a public forestry trail that ran behind the rental property. The listing map had shown the trail clearly, allowing me to observe the rear of the cabin without crossing its marked boundary. Through the trees, I saw Natalie's car beside the black SUV. Then I heard her laugh. It was open, careless, and intimate. I remembered hearing that same laugh on our second date and thinking I would spend my life trying to earn it. Now she was giving it to another man. I stood between the trees, while the last part of me still hoping for an innocent explanation finally died. Then I moved closer along the public trail, toward the rear window. I stayed on the public trail and moved toward the back of the cabin, careful not to cross the low boundary markers separating the rental property from the forest. A curtain covered most of the rear window, but one edge had slipped aside. From the trail, I could see part of the living room. Clothing lay across the floor. A wine bottle stood open beside 2 glasses, one tipped onto its side. I had seen enough. For several seconds, I fought the ugliest instinct I had ever felt. I wanted to cross the boundary, break through the door, and make the man inside understand exactly whose life he had entered. I wanted Natalie to see that the husband she considered predictable could become someone else. Then Daniel's warning returned to me. Do not turn a strong case into a weak one. I stepped back and documented only what could be seen from where I lawfully stood. I photographed the cabin number, both vehicles, the SUV's full registration plate, and the time displayed on my phone. I recorded a short video showing the property and the 2 cars together. I captured nothing explicit and never entered the cabin grounds. As I started back toward the road, voices drifted through the partly open window. Then Natalie mentioned my name. I stopped. "Elijah will be at the office until at least 6, she told the man. "His schedule never changes." The man asked, "Do you think he suspects anything?" Natalie laughed softly before replying, "No, Elijah is too loyal and he's too afraid of starting over. Her words did not hit me like a slap. A slap is sudden and hot. Her words entered quietly and stayed. In one sentence, she reduced every sacrifice I had made to cowardice. My loyalty was not love to her. It was a weakness she believed she could exploit. The man, whom I later identified as Evan Cross, asked, "How long are you going to keep pretending at home?" "Until I'm ready to leave on my terms," she answered. That was the moment my grief hardened into purpose. I returned to the roadside where both vehicles were parked near the cabin entrance. Anger overruled sense for less than 2 minutes, using a small valve tool from my jack. I removed the valve cores from the tires of both cars. Air hissed into the quiet woods. The sound satisfied something primitive in me. Then it frightened me. I had gained nothing and created a careless act that could be used against me. Before either of them came outside, I returned to my car and drove directly to Daniel's office. This time, I did not speak hypothetically. I showed him the dashcam footage, tracker history, cabin photographs, and account records I had begun reviewing. The earliest unexplained cabin-related charge was 14 weeks old. Additional restaurant payments, fuel purchases, and cash withdrawals matched dates on which Natalie had given false accounts of her time. "This is substantial evidence," Daniel said after reviewing it. "The affair provision is relevant, and the spending records support deliberate misuse of marital funds. Your premarital property remains protected." Then I admitted what I had done to the tires. Daniel's expression hardened. "You are building a clean case," he replied. "Do not give her a reason to describe you as unstable. There will be no more tampering, no contact with Evan, and no confrontation unless we prepare for it first." "You're right," I answered. "It won't happen again." Daniel began preparing the divorce petition and a request for temporary possession of my premarital home. He also asked whether I wanted Evan's wife, Dana, informed through lawful channels. "She deserves the truth I wish someone had given me," I replied. Before leaving his office, I called Natalie. "I'm feeling ill, so I left work early," I told her. "Will you be home soon?" After a pause, she answered too brightly, "Of course, I'm just finishing something." "Could you make soup when you get back?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "I'll be there soon." I ended the call and looked at Daniel. Natalie believed she was racing home to protect a lie. She did not know the divorce papers were already being prepared. The house on Whitfield Lane was silent when I returned that Thursday afternoon. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the life Natalie and I had assembled. Copper pans she had selected, a framed print we had debated for weeks, a small succulent on the windowsill that I watered because she always forgot. I had spent years believing those objects represented a shared life. Now they looked like evidence from a room where something had happened. Daniel had given me instructions, and I followed each one. I changed passwords on accounts held solely in my name. I froze the additional credit card issued to Natalie on my personal account, then photographed the statement and documented 3 more charges connected to the affair. I did not touch our joint checking account. I made an inventory of furniture, electronics, jewelry, and artwork, removing nothing and timestamping every photograph. The purpose was not to leave her without access to money. Daniel had warned me against that. The purpose was to stop new charges on my individual account and prevent either of us from later claiming that property had disappeared. Then I entered our bedroom. I took Natalie's largest suitcase from the wardrobe and packed clothing, toiletries, her passport, personal documents, and jewelry she had owned before our marriage. I folded everything carefully. That surprised me. I had imagined rage would make me careless, but every item carried a memory I was not ready to handle roughly. The gray cardigan from winter evenings. The dress she wore on our Charleston anniversary. The scarf my mother gave her at Christmas. I placed the suitcase beside the front door. I did not change the locks. Daniel had made it clear that ownership of the house did not give me permission to remove Natalie by force before a court ruled on temporary possession. At 3:30, he emailed the completed divorce petition. I printed it with selected photographs, relevant prenup clauses, and a summary of the 14 weeks of documented spending. I sealed everything inside an envelope and left it on the living room table. Then I called Natalie's parents. Her father answered. I have documented proof that Natalie has been having an affair and using marital money to support it, I told him. I'm filing for divorce. She may contact you tonight, and I wanted you to hear the facts before that happens. After a long silence, her father asked, Elijah, are you certain? Yes, I answered. I wish I were. A little after 4, Daniel called with new information. Dana Cross had acted quickly. Using only the dates and location information Daniel had lawfully shared, she checked devices and accounts she jointly accessed with Evan. She found months of messages between him and Natalie. They discussed leaving both marriages, Daniel explained. They also discussed what each of them hoped to obtain financially before filing. So the affair was part of a plan, I said. That is what the messages sug. Est, he replied. Natalie believed she could challenge the prenup by alleging emotional neglect and financial dependence. Do not reveal everything immediately. Let her give you her version before you show her the messages. The affair had not simply been a betrayal. It had been a business plan, and I was expected to provide the capital. Natalie called around 5:30. Caroline is having a serious anxiety episode, she said. I need to stay with her for a while. I hope she's safe, I replied. Come home when you can. 2 hours later, she called again. The car has developed a problem, she told me. Roadside assistance is trying to fix it. Do you need me to collect you? I asked. No, she answered quickly. It's handled. The tracker remained fixed at the cabin. I understood that the flat tires had delayed them, but Natalie still believed I knew nothing about where she was. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock, then 3. I sat in the armchair facing the front door, surrounded by the quiet of a house I once considered secure. At 4:30, Daniel sent another message. Dana had changed the code on the smart lock at the home she shared with Evan and moved his packed belongings into the garage. She had also alerted his business partners to possible company charges connected to the cabin. Whether Evan challenged her actions later was now a matter for their lawyers. At 4:57, headlights crossed my front window. A taxi stopped at the curb. Natalie stepped out carrying one broken shoe. Mud covered the side of her bare foot, probably from walking down the gravel drive after roadside assistance had taken the disabled car away. I straightened in the chair. The envelope waited on the table. The suitcase waited beside the door. I waited for my wife to choose her first lie. The key entered the lock slowly. Natalie opened the door with the caution of someone still deciding which expression to wear. One lamp illuminated the envelope on the table, the suitcase in the hallway, and my face. She stopped. Her clothes were creased. Mud streaked one shin. She carried a broken heel, and dried mascara marked the skin beneath her eyes. I let the silence stretch. Long lunch, I said. Her face changed as she selected a story. Caroline had a serious anxiety episode, she explained. I couldn't leave her alone. Which hospital treated her? I asked. She refused to go, Natalie replied. Who else was with you? I asked. No one, she answered. Where does Caroline live? I continued. Natalie named a street on the wrong side of Greenville. I placed the envelope between us. Open it, I told her. She stared at it, then tore the flap. The first page was the divorce petition. Behind it were cabin photographs, a dashcam still, a 14-week financial timeline, tracker records from the previous 2 weeks, highlighted prenup clauses, and credit card statements. These photographs prove nothing, she said quickly. You followed me, this is insane. There it was, not remorse, counterattack. I documented 6 cabin visits supported by charges, messages, or location records, I replied. Today was the only one I followed. It only happened once, she insisted. You're twisting everything. I pushed the timeline toward her. Then explain 14 weeks of payments and messages, I answered. Natalie changed direction. Evan pursued me when I was lonely, she said. You were never here, you cared more about work than us. You told him I was too loyal and too afraid to start over, I replied. The room went still. She had not expected me to hear that. I placed the printed messages beside the petition. Her chosen meeting dates, descriptions of my schedule, and discussions about challenging the prenup by alleging financial control. The color left her face. Then she cried. The tears were real, and watching them hurt more than I expected. Betrayal does not erase memory. Part of me still recognized the woman who had held my hand through my father's surgery. Natalie reached for me. I'll end it with Evan, she promised. I'll go to counseling, I made a mistake. I stepped back. A mistake is one bad decision followed by honesty, I answered. You made choices for 14 weeks and built lies around them. I love you, she whispered. No, I replied. You loved what my loyalty allowed you to avoid. When I told her I had spoken to her parents, she stared at me. You called my father, she asked. Yes, I answered. I told him the marriage was ending and why. That was private, she snapped. Our marriage was private too, I replied. You invited Evan into it. Then I told her Daniel had contacted Dana Cross. Natalie's phone rang. Evan's name appeared on the screen. Answer it and use the speaker, I said. She hesitated, then obeyed. Dana changed the code, Evan said frantically. My things are in the garage, and my partners are asking about the cabin expense. I need somewhere to stay. What do you expect me to do? Natalie asked. Can I come to your house? He replied. Natalie looked at me, as though I were still responsible for solving everything. I pointed toward the suitcase. I packed your personal things, I told her. I am asking you to stay elsewhere tonight. I have not changed the locks, and I will not touch you. If you refuse, I will leave and let the court decide possession. You're throwing me out at 5 in the morning, she accused. I am asking you to leave the house you plan to take from me, I answered. I'll challenge the prenup, she threatened. Your lawyer can review the evidence, I replied. You're humiliating me, she said. I am refusing to hide what you did, I answered. I have nowhere to go, she whispered. That is not a situation I created, I replied. Evan kept asking whether he could come over. Natalie lifted the suitcase. At the threshold, she turned back. Please, Elijah, she said, let me sleep here tonight. For 1 second, every year of our marriage stood between us. Mercy could become another delay and another chance for manipulation. I spent 14 weeks sleeping beside a stranger, I replied. You can spend 1 night somewhere else. She stepped onto the porch barefoot. I don't have anywhere, she told Evan. I can't deal with this tonight, Evan replied before ending the call. The man for whom she had risked everything had abandoned her as soon as she became inconvenient. Natalie called her father from the porch. He agreed to collect her but made clear she could stay only temporarily. She took the suitcase and walked toward the curb. I closed the door only after she chose to leave. I expected triumph. Instead, I felt exhausted. Beneath that exhaustion was the first clean breath I had taken since opening the dashcam file. For years, Natalie had mistaken patience for weakness. At 5 in the morning, she finally learned the difference. The divorce threatened to become hostile during the first 2 weeks. Natalie accused me of emotional neglect, financial control, and humiliation. She claimed the prenup was coercive and that my work schedule had made her dependent. Then her attorney reviewed the footage, messages, account records, and the signed agreement. The accusations stopped. The prenup held. I kept the house, business shares, and investments I had owned before the marriage. The misuse of marital money weakened her position further. Natalie received her personal possessions, the car after refinancing it, and her portion of our joint savings. She received no share of my house or business and no continuing support. Her parents allowed her to stay briefly, but refused to finance her. Caroline offered a room, then asked her to leave after discovering the false alibis. Natalie rented a studio and took a receptionist position at a dental clinic. Honest work was not her punishment. The consequence was supporting the life she had assumed my loyalty would always finance. Dana proceeded with her divorce from Evan. His business partners pursued the cabin expenses, and he sold his SUV to cover legal costs. Without secrecy, comfort, and fantasies about other people's money, his relationship with Natalie collapsed within weeks. Natalie sent messages. Some were apologies, others were accusations disguised as apologies. I forwarded each one to Daniel and never responded. I spent the months learning to live in my own house again. I cooked for one, reconnected with friends, and watched afternoon light move through the west-facing windows. I kept watering the succulent Natalie had always forgotten. Revenge did not feel like celebration. It felt like clarity. Natalie had believed my patience was permanent and my forgiveness automatic. She was wrong. The papers were filed, the door was closed, and I was no longer waiting behind it for her to come home.